My young friends, today we are going to interact on very interesting subject so far as India is concerned, and that pertains to the dimensions of Indian sculpture. Indian sculpture is a part of Indian art. So before I start Indian sculpture precisely, at the outset I would like to say something about what should we understand by art in Indian context. Art is the visual expression which involves experience, exercise and dexterity. Dexterity is dakshata. One very interesting point has been made by a great scholar of Indian art and sculpture, A.K. Kumaraswamy. He has written that as the love is reality for a lover, truth is reality for a philosopher, so is the beauty for an artist. And it must be understood that in art, in any of its forms, which is the objective work through which the main objective is to express or manifest the Supreme Being, who is omnipresent, whom we call Ishwar, Param Purush in Indian context, absolute Supreme God in English. And it is said that He is manifested in every work of art. Now, coming to sculpture, how to understand and appreciate it? Well, it is the work with aesthetic expression, the beauty is there. It is the creation which presents the contemporary social life in entirety, the decoration, the shringar, the ornaments, the jewelry, the drapery. How did the people live? What were ways of their living? What were their main involvement so far as the social context is concerned? As well as one of the main components was the religion also. Religion, which was to show the path, the real path to final bliss or salvation, that is called moksha, which is the ultimate aim in Indian philosophy. And that is being expressed through different forms of the gods and goddesses, the deities, which to many of the Western scholars looked somewhat very surprising, sometimes even odd, that Indian gods having 2, 3 or 5 or even more faces, a number of hands, riding on different animals and birds. This was because they could not get into the very spirit of the Indian art. One thing I would like to make it clear at the outset, that whatever was represented in Indian sculpture, now I come to this sculpture, was not merely for the visual manifestation, not merely for the sake of the presentation of aesthetic or the beauty, but beyond that, all the sculptures, each and every piece of sculpture has some social purpose to serve. Now it was for us to understand what social purpose was intended or what suggested or communicated through these sculptures. To understand Indian sculpture, we must be clear in mind that it has two aspects. One is the form, what we see, what we look at, that is called roop. The anatomical features, the body proportions, the dress, ornaments, jewelry, everything. And the other aspect is the bhav or the expression, which was more important, because it was only through the expression or the bhav that any piece of sculptures becomes lively, animated, because that is the life element. I just give an example to you. Suppose a person is lying on the earth, so beautiful, so far as the body look is concerned, having number of ornaments, very good drapery and all that, but still we call him a dead body. Shava, nirjiva, lifeless. So what is that life? That life is the action, life is the mobility, and that mobility and action comes through the expression. When one speaks, one says something, one moves, one talks to other persons. So that expression is essential to make any piece of sculpture a real piece of art and make it an animated object of art. Another two aspects, equally important, that how the whole process of creation goes on. We all know that whatever we create or whatever is being manifested, either it is in sculpture, in painting, in temple, or even in literary works, any sort of creation. The first stage is the perception. We perceive something within, and that perception from within comes out and is being created and recreated. In different forms, it becomes the deity, it becomes Buddha, it becomes a Jain pontiff, it could be Vishnu, Shiv, or any deity or god in Indian context. So perception and creation. What we get, what we look at is the creation. And what goes wrong with it, that while appreciating any piece of sculpture, we start appreciating it, analyzing it only by way of what we see formally in the forms. But unless we go into the very spirit or the content of that spirit, that is the perception or conception, we cannot really appreciate. I would just give you few examples. It must be clear that in Indian sculptures, particularly of the divinities, of the gods and goddesses belonging to any of the religious and cultural streams, three of them, as we all know, is the Vedic or Vedic Puranic consequently, which give birth to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Kartikeya, Ganesh, Shakti, different aspects of Shakti, Navagrahas, 9 planets, Ashtadikpalas, the 8 guardian deities of the cardinal points. And Buddhism and Jainism, in the center of which Buddha is there, and in case of Jainism it is a Jain Tirthankar or Jin he is known as. It is also important that when we tell somebody that it is the image of a Jain Tirthankar or a Jin, unless we are familiar with the word Jin, what actually it does connote, we cannot understand the very purpose of making that sculpture. Or Buddha. Buddha is an enlightened one, a person who has been able to know himself, could look within. A Jin is a person who has become invincible or victor or invincible, not in worldly terms, but in spiritual terms. Again the same meaning. Who is Atmajayi, who has been able to know himself, who has been able to win over himself, his passion, his desire, his anger. And through those images, the same content or same feeling is being expressed in visual terms. All the images of the gods and goddesses which we found in profound number in Buddhism, Jainism and Vedic Puranic context, thousands and hundreds and lakhs of images. But have you ever thought that what do they actually represent? What is the social significance of those images? I would just make few references to them. That they are to give us the social model or code of conduct when we start worshipping an image. What do we worship? Only the form? No. It is the concept, it is the idea which gave birth or form to that particular deity or image. That we worship. And in that sense, we must know that none of the image of Indian deity, now I use the word Indian, is a portrait. It's not the actual image. Nobody has seen Buddha. Nobody has seen Jain Tirthankar or even Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, Saraswati, Durga. It is the conceptual form. The form which carry several concepts, several meaning, the meaning which are significant to the society or the people. So, just I make reference to Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. You all must be familiar with them. The Brahminical Trinity, Trideva. Brahma is the god of creation. Vishnu is the god of preservation, sustenance. And Shiva is the god of dissolution, samhara. Is it all? No. These are the three stages of life or anything. The existence, the life, and finally the end, which are being represented by these three Brahminical gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Now it is the philosophical explanation. Another social context, Brahma, what is the form? When we find a figure of Brahma, we find that he is shown with a beard, four faces are there with him. He holds a wooden ladle that is called sruk, with which the material at the time of the yajna is being put in the fire. He holds a manuscript and he rides a swan, hums. So these features distinctly show that Brahma is associated with the ascetic aspect and component of the society. The manuscript are the four Vedas, the four faces are the four Vedas. Not four Vedas only, is the embodiment of knowledge, and those four Vedas are supposed to be covering the entire, all the directions, four directions, through the four faces of Brahma. The swan represents the knowledge, Neer Kshir Vivek. It can discriminate between the water and the milk. So ascetic aspect of society represented by Brahma, while Vishnu is an administrator. He has to take care of the problems and all the welfare of the people, and therefore he is always shown with the brilliant and highly decorated mukut and all other jewelries and ornaments. And for that purpose, what does he hold? He holds a disc, chakra. Like a missile, it can be used, it can be hurled from a distance as and when required. To save the right person, the virtuous person, from the agony of the evil persons. So in any situation of crisis, he also holds the mace that is called Gada. And he rides on an eagle, the fastest vehicle, on which he can make a move very swiftly. So here comes the character. So he represents the royalty, the ruling elite class of Indian society. While Shiva, who is also called Pashupatinath, the lord of the animals, Bhutanath, he wears snakes, trident, and he is the god mainly of the tribal people, or the people living in the remote areas, Vananchal. So that way, all the three main segments of Indian society, sociologically speaking, are being represented by the sculptures of these three deities. Now coming to Buddha and Tirthankar, they are represented as preceptor, because concept, it is not the portrait. In Indian context, one more important thing is that barring Brahma and Agni, you will always find Indian deities in their prime youth looking so beautiful, because that is the age of energy. So here comes the rationale, that they are always in action. They were shown as an old man, barring two deities. So Buddha is a preceptor, and three elements were combined or fused, and then came the form of Buddha, or even the Jain Tirthankar, as we will just see. One was that of a yogi, preceptor, either sitting or standing in the posture of meditation or trance, half shut eyes, inward look. Then they are the great men, Mahapurush. Therefore, few of the elements of the great men were also imbibed. They will be shown with long hanging arms, Ajanu Lamba. Lamb Karan, long earlobes, broad chest. These are given in the text. And third was the Chakravarti, the supreme ruler. But supreme ruler not in worldly sense, like a king having authority, sword and so many, no. Chakravarti in the sense of the spiritual ruler, Adhyatmic ruler, who has been able to win over himself. How it is suggested? Buddha and Jain Tirthankar both are provided with the loin throne that is called Simhasan, supported by two loins. They will be shown with two flanking fly-whisk bearing attendants, Chamardharas. So all these three concepts visually to be translated or shown, as I have just told you. And when all these three fused into one, a human form, which is a young, beautiful, it becomes Buddha or a Jainti. So that is how in Indian sculpture we should try to understand the things. The religion is there, that is the prime concern, because through religion in India we find that Indian society was educated, was guided, because religion was the main source of guidance, putting before us the code of conduct, and these images through visual language do the same work of putting those words through the visual forms. Another thing is that when we look at Indian sculpture, apart from religious imagery, the gods, images of the gods and goddesses, sculptures of the gods, I must clear one more thing. There are two words. Sculpture is the common denomination. In sculpture, one is image or icon or idol. Pratima in Sanskrit. means such sculpture which pertain to the figures of some or the other deities or any form of a deity who are to be worshipped, or the sculptures in worship and showing the figures of some gods and goddesses should be called icon, image or idol. While the others sculptures which are non-religious or secular in character, they deal with the worldly activities. They represent the contemporary life, feeling, experience. Because one thing more should be clear in the mind, that Indian sculptures were not individual product. It was the manifestation of the collective wisdom and experience of the society. Like the modern Indian sculpture or even in Western world. So far as the ancient Indian sculptures are concerned, up to 13th, 14th century, common era, which I am going to deal with, they are the outcome of the collective experience and wisdom of the society. So that way they have got, they are definitely more significant because they present before us the contemporary society in collective sense. To understand Indian sculpture, the dimension of time and space is also very important. And it is not only with the sculpture or Indian art, but we must be very clear in our mind that it is the time and space which dictates the development or evolution of anything. It is only in the backdrop of time and space that any development change does occur. And to understand the development, we must honor, we must go by the time and space, and so is the case with Indian sculpture. Indian culture is thoroughly and vividly represented, its different shades are represented in Indian sculptures, which we will just see. But to understand them, we must take a holistic view, an integrated approach. Because what happens that we impose our own feeling today in 21st century, 20th century on the manifestation or the sculptural manifestations of those ancient times. While it was not like that. Here we just catch hold of Buddha, we catch hold of Shiva and say that this is Shiva and it is only the Shiva who is the supreme. It is the Buddha only, and it is only Buddhism through which the entire Indian culture developed. It was not the original concept. The concept on the basis of which the people of those ancient times did make such images. So therefore, we must be sincere, we must be honest, that we must try to be away from our own perception, own notion, prejudices, and take a holistic view under which those sculptures were actually carved. Had it not been there, how can we find the figure of Buddha on a Jain temple, or figure of Vishnu, Shiva, Shakti on a Jain temple? So that narrow sectarian concept was never accepted in Indian context. And now we look at them with our own narrow 21st century in the age of globalization. It is unfortunate, but it is the real state of affair. Then Indian sculpture, we would find how beautifully we are so much concerned about ecology today, Paryavaran. It is in peril, and our life is in danger. How are we going to survive the harm we have already made to the nature, the animal world? And our ancient people were so much concerned about that not only in Shanti Mantra they said that Vanaspateha Shanti. In Mahabharata several passages are there. But in sculptures we can beautifully see that how in a very inseparable way, asamprikta, we cannot separate them. The world of nature, the world of, let me say, flora and fauna, with the divine or the human world. So interwoven. If a beautiful lady is standing, is dancing, you will find umbrella of some tree over her head. If we look at swan with Brahma, Garuda with Vishnu, bull with Shiva, different birds and animals with Jain Tirthankaras, what is that? This is how the world of fauna was going along with the world of divinity. If we worship Shiva, the bull will be there. We cannot separate them. How was that? Not only Buddha, not only all the 24 Jain Tirthankaras, but Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Ram, they all are associated with the world of nature, mountain, the trees, the knowledge they attain always under some or the other tree. So, in a very beautiful way, the concern about ecology and how ecology is essential for human life has been shown throughout in Indian sculptures, is also very important when we study the Indian sculpture. Two more things only. One is Indian culture has been a composite culture. Still we say, it has been, it is, and it will be. Diversity, unity in diversity. So much of diversity in terms of language, dress, ornament, concepts, religion. But still, the idea of compositeness is important, which gets us united, integrated. And that composite aspect is being shown in Indian sculptures by way of showing 2 or 3 deities together as one. The best example is the composite image of Shiva and Shakti, or Shiva and Parvati, which is called Ardhanarishwar. And the concept beautifully explained by Kalidas in Raghuvansha, when he says, Vagartha viva sampriktau, Vagartha pratipattaye, Jagatah pitaro bande, Parvati Parmeshwar. They are inseparable, like the Vani, speech, and the meaning. We cannot separate. So again here comes the message through the sculptures. And another point is that how in Indian sculpture the concept of or the force of collective power has been shown. From the very childhood, you must have been taught a story how the 7 brothers were there, they were always fighting, and how the father came with a stick and asked to break it. Everybody could do it, but when 7 put together, nobody could break it. So here comes the force of collective power that is being shown in Indian sculptures. I will show how. And through such images, through such sculptures, a very vital, great message of socio-political unity was given to the society to get united. And the best example is that of Durga Maheshmardini, whom we worship every year with great rejoice, with great pomp and show. She is nothing but the manifestation or the outcome of the collective power.